A world where humans are not at the top of the food chain, but merely one of its participants. A world where every day is a struggle for survival. A world where your cave neighbor may be a creature that, although similar to you, surpasses you in every way in terms of strength and endurance. We are talking about Neanderthals. For a long time, we considered them primitive creatures incapable of thought, but recent discoveries are changing our perception of them. They were not just our ancestors, but a separate species that existed alongside us for thousands of years. Their physiology, intelligence, and lifestyle made them formidable rivals. They were true monsters of nature who, it would seem, should have wiped us off the face of the earth, but for some reason they disappeared. Watch the video to the end to find out how our ancestors encountered these powerful creatures and why they survived, not the Neanderthals. Our knowledge of Neanderthals is based on the study of their bones and artifacts found in caves throughout Europe and Asia. These findings have allowed us to recreate their appearance and understand how different they were from us. Neanderthals were stocky, with broad shoulders and a massive chest. Their skeleton was denser and heavier than that of modern humans. This suggests incredible strength. Scientists believe that Neanderthals could easily handle large game alone, using only primitive tools. They were like biological tanks, designed to survive the harsh conditions of the Ice Age. Their muscles, especially in the arms and shoulders, were so developed that they could throw spears with incredible accuracy and force. This was their main advantage when hunting. They were not afraid to engage in close combat with large animals such as mammoths or woolly rhinos. Their endurance allowed them to pursue their prey for many hours. Neanderthals also had a stronger grip, which allowed them to use their tools more effectively. Their arms were shorter than ours, but they were wider, with more massive bones. This allowed them to deliver powerful blows and easily break animal bones to get to the marrow. If you encountered a Neanderthal one-on-one, you would have no chance in a physical confrontation. They were capable not only of tremendous single efforts, but also of prolonged physical exertion, which was necessary for survival. This physical power was the result not only of their genetics, but also of the constant exertion they were subjected to from childhood. Every action they took, from searching for food to defending their territory, required incredible effort. Their lives were filled with hard physical labor, which shaped their bodies and made them incredibly well adapted to their environment. Neanderthals were the embodiment of strength and endurance. Their existence was a constant challenge to nature, and they coped with it using their tremendous strength. Their powerful bone structure and developed musculature allowed them to easily traverse rough terrain and withstand severe frosts. They did not just survive, they thrived in conditions that would be deadly to modern humans. Their ability to adapt was phenomenal, and it was based on their incredible physical strength. Think about which Neanderthal skill you would like to have today and why. Write about it in the comments. The Neanderthals' perfect adaptation to their harsh living conditions, while allowing them to thrive for thousands of years, ultimately became their Achilles heel. When the climate began to change and their familiar habitat disappeared, their narrow specialization worked against them. They were not prepared to adapt to new food sources or changing hunting conditions. Homo sapiens, with their more diverse diet and ability to adapt, had a significant advantage. They could hunt small game, gather plants, and fish, which made them less dependent on a single type of resource. Neanderthals also differed from Homo sapiens in their social structure. They probably lived in small, isolated groups, which made it difficult to exchange knowledge, technology, and genetic material. This led to less variability and, as a result, slower development. In contrast, scientists believe that Homo sapiens formed larger, interconnected communities, which facilitated the spread of innovation and increased survivability. This difference in social organization may have been one of the key factors that determined the outcome of their coexistence. On the other hand, it cannot be said that Neanderthals were primitive. Their complex burial culture, the presence of jewelry, and the use of symbols indicate a high level of cognitive ability, but their technology developed more slowly than that of our ancestors. Neanderthal tools, although effective for hunting large game, remained relatively unchanged for millennia. This contrasts with the rapid innovations in Homo sapiens technology, who constantly improved their tools and hunting methods. Why did these strong and intelligent creatures disappear, giving way to our ancestors? Was their extinction inevitable, Or could they have survived if they had not been so perfectly adapted to their world? Watch the video to the end to find out the answer to this question. The Neanderthals' life was a constant struggle. Their wounds and injuries, which we know about from their bones, indicate that they lived in a world full of dangers. Their lives were shorter than those of modern humans. Their average life expectancy rarely exceeded 30-40 years. Every hunt was a risk. Every encounter with a wild animal could be their last. Despite this, they were incredibly resilient. Their bones were denser than ours, which made them less prone to fractures. And their ability to heal wounds quickly allowed them to survive serious injuries. They knew how to care for the sick and wounded. This is evidenced by Neanderthal skeletons, which show signs of healed fractures that probably required the help of their fellow tribesmen. Their lifestyle was nomadic. They followed animal herds, constantly moving from place to place. They lived in small groups consisting of several families. This made them vulnerable to large predators and other hominid groups. Their survival depended on the unity of the group and their ability to work together. The fact that Neanderthals cared for the sick and wounded is clear evidence of their social cohesion and empathy. This debunks the common myth about them as primitive, undeveloped beings. Finds such as the skeleton of an elderly man who had no teeth and probably lived on liquid food suggest that his relatives cared for him over a long period of time. This demonstrates a complex social structure in which physical strength and endurance were not the only qualities valued. Their technology was also impressive. Neanderthals used the so-called Mousterian culture, creating multifunctional stone tools that were ideal for cutting carcasses, processing hides, and preparing food. They also knew how to make spears with stone tips, which significantly increased their hunting efficiency. These tools were not as diverse as those of Homo sapiens, but they were incredibly practical and durable, allowing them to survive in harsh conditions. Despite their endurance and advanced survival skills, Neanderthals' lives remained precarious. Climate fluctuations, the decline in large game populations, and competition with our ancestors, Homo sapiens, led to their extinction. Scientists still argue about what exactly was the decisive factor. Some suggest that Homo sapiens outnumbered them and were more adaptable, while others point to assimilation, as traces of Neanderthal DNA are found in many modern humans. However, it should not be forgotten that even in conditions of constant struggle for survival, they left their mark on history, creating a unique culture and demonstrating an incredible ability to adapt. One of the biggest questions in human history is the disappearance of the Neanderthals. About 40,000 years ago, they began to die out, and within a few thousand years, they were completely gone. At the same time, Homo sapiens, our ancestors, began to spread rapidly across the planet. Why did Neanderthals, who possessed such strength and endurance, give way to us? There are several theories. One of them is climate change. The Ice Age receded, and forests replaced the cold tundra. The large game that Neanderthals hunted began to disappear, and they were unable to adapt to the new conditions. We, on the other hand, were more flexible in our choice of food and could hunt small animals, gather plants, and catch fish. Another theory is competition. We were more inventive. We created more sophisticated tools and used bows and arrows, which allowed us to hunt from a distance without engaging in close combat. Our social organization was also more developed. We lived in large groups, which made us less vulnerable and allowed us to exchange knowledge and experience. What do you think played a key role in their disappearance? Let's discuss it further. One of the most discussed theories explaining the disappearance of Neanderthal is their integration and assimilation into the Homo sapiens population. Recent genetic studies have shown that many modern humans, especially Europeans and Asians, have a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. This indicates that our ancestors and Neanderthals not only coexisted, but also interbred. Thus, it is possible that Neanderthals did not so much die out as were dissolved into the more numerous and rapidly developing Homo sapiens population. Their genes remain with us, which is a kind of immortality. There is also a theory that Neanderthals may have fallen victim to epidemics brought by Homo sapiens. When two populations that have been isolated from each other for a long time come into contact, new diseases can spread with devastating force. Neanderthals had no immunity to infections that were common to our ancestors. This situation could have played a fatal role and caused a mass extinction from which Neanderthals were unable to recover. This hypothesis explains why their population declined so rapidly, even though it was well adapted to local conditions. In addition, the cultural superiority of Homo sapiens cannot be ruled out. Although Neanderthals possessed intelligence, they could not compare with our ancestors in terms of symbolic thinking. We created art, jewelry, had more complex rituals, and possibly a more developed language. This gave us an advantage in communication, planning, and coordination of actions. Our ability to think abstractly allowed us to adapt more quickly and find new unconventional solutions. The invention of bows and arrows, fishing hooks, and the ability to make clothes from skins all made our lives easier. How did it happen that a civilization that had created such a developed culture gave way to those who used only primitive tools? It is time to look at this from a different angle and figure out what other factors led to their disappearance. Despite their apparent simplicity, Neanderthals were capable of amazing things. Scientists are finding more and more evidence that they were not only able to survive, but also to create art. Cave paintings have been found throughout Europe, dating back to the time of their existence. This suggests that they possessed a developed imagination and symbolic thinking. They also used jewelry. Shell and bone beads have been found in their caves, which they probably used for rituals or as personal adornments. All this indicates that Neanderthals were not just animals, but intelligent beings who had their own culture and traditions. In the Cima de los Huesos cave in Spain, archaeologists found the remains of 28 Neanderthals, which may be one of the earliest examples of ritual burials. This discovery challenges previous ideas that Neanderthals were exclusively crude and primitive. Such actions indicate a deep understanding of death and possibly the existence of some form of belief, which is one of the fundamental features of human culture. Neanderthal burials often contain not only bodies, but also objects, indicating the existence of funeral rites and possibly beliefs in the afterlife. In addition to jewelry and burial rites, there is other evidence of the Neanderthals' advanced culture. A study of their tools shows that they were not merely functional. Some of them were complex in design and required a high level of skill to make. For example, tools found in the Lascaux cave show the use of various stone processing techniques, indicating the existence of transmitted knowledge and possibly even apprenticeships. This suggests that Neanderthals did not simply copy actions, but improved their skills and passed them on from generation to generation. Recent research has also revealed that Neanderthals used fire for more than just heating and cooking. Traces of soot on cave walls, as well as charcoal remains, indicate that they may have used fire to illuminate interior spaces. This allowed them to venture deep into caves, creating intricate works of art and possibly places for rituals. Moreover, some scientists suggest that Neanderthals had the beginnings of speech. A study of the hyoid bone found in one of them showed that it was similar in structure to that of humans. This feature, along with their developed brains, may have allowed them to make complex sounds and communicate with each other. All these discoveries force us to rethink our view of Neanderthals, seeing them not just as an extinct species, but as our closest relatives with a developed culture and intelligence. The differences between us and Neanderthals were not only in strength and endurance. Their skulls had a different shape than ours. They had a more massive brow ridge and a sloping forehead. Their jaws were larger with larger teeth, which allowed them to chew tough food with ease. Neanderthals also had shorter limbs, which helped them stay warm in cold climates. Their broad chest contained large lungs, allowing them to withstand heavy physical exertion. All this made them ideally suited to harsh living conditions. DNA studies of Neanderthals show that their unique physiology was the result of millions of years of evolution. Scientists have discovered genes that were likely responsible for denser bone structure and increased muscle mass. These adaptations were vital for survival during the Ice Age, when they had to hunt large game and constantly move across rough terrain. In addition, the genes associated with skin and hair color were also unique, which may have helped them better adapt to the level of sunlight in Europe. Another important difference was in the characteristics of their brains. Although Neanderthals' brains were larger than ours on average, their structure was different. Scientists suggest that they had more developed areas responsible for vision and coordination, which was important for hunting and survival. However, the areas associated with social interaction and planning may have been less developed. These physical characteristics were key to their survival and are still being studied, But was there one physical trait that was most important for their survival? Keep reading to find out what their genetics say about this. One of the most surprising facts about Neanderthals is that they did not disappear without a trace. Scientists have discovered that most people living outside Africa have a small amount of Neanderthal genes. This suggests that our ancestors interbred with Neanderthals. These genes probably helped us adapt to new conditions. For example, some of them are believed to have helped us adapt to cold climates and fight infections that were common in Europe and Asia. Thus, although Neanderthals died out as a species, they left their mark on our genetic history. Recent studies have deepened our understanding of this genetic heritage. It turns out that the genes inherited from Neanderthals affect various aspects of our health and appearance. For example, some of them are related to the condition of our skin and hair, as well as our immune system. Researchers suggest that these genes helped our ancestors survive by protecting them from local diseases and allowing them to better adapt to new environmental conditions. However, not all genes have proven to be beneficial. Some of them, as it turns out, may increase the risk of developing certain diseases, such as diabetes or depression. This discovery forces us to take a fresh look at human history. We can no longer view Neanderthals as simply an extinct species. They were our ancestors, albeit to a lesser extent, and their genetic legacy lives on in each of us. The interaction between the two species was more complex and longer-lasting than previously thought, and it may be thanks to this interaction that our ancestors were able to colonize new continents. For a long time, it was believed that Neanderthals could not speak, but recent studies have shown that they had a gene responsible for speech development. This suggests that they may have had their own language. However, it was probably not as complex as ours. We do not know what their speech sounded like, but we can assume that it was simpler and consisted of short phrases and sounds. This could have been another reason for their extinction. Our ability to communicate in complex ways and think abstractly has allowed us to form more complex social bonds and pass knowledge down from generation to generation. Recent discoveries have expanded our knowledge of the potential speech abilities of Neanderthals. Scientists studying the structure of their throats and skulls have found evidence that anatomically they were capable of producing a wide range of sounds. The bones of their throats were similar in shape to those of humans, which made speech possible. But even if they could speak, their language was probably different from ours. Some researchers suggest that it was less flexible and did not allow for the creation of sentences as complex and multi-layered as ours. Perhaps the difference was not so much in the ability to produce sounds as in the complexity of thought itself. Our language allows us to share abstract ideas, make complex plans, and tell stories, which is the basis of culture and civilization. It is likely that Neanderthals, lacking such a developed language, were less capable of collective coordination in the exchange of complex knowledge. This could have been a decisive factor in their survival and ultimately contributed to their extinction. Neanderthals were masters at making tools. They used stone and bone to create spears, scrapers, and knives. Their tools were functional and effective, but they did not change over thousands of years. This suggests that Neanderthals were not as inventive as we are. Homo sapiens, on the other hand, constantly improved their tools. We created new technologies, such as bows and arrows, which gave us an advantage in hunting. We also knew how to create more complex tools that allowed us to process materials and create more complex objects. Recent archaeological finds and research show that the difference between the tools of Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons, Homo sapiens, was more complex. Although Neanderthal tools, known as the Mysterian industry, did indeed remain relatively unchanged, this does not necessarily indicate a lack of intelligence. Their tools were perfectly suited to specific tasks, such as skinning and butchering carcasses. They were so effective that there was no need to improve them. However, evidence has been found in recent years that Neanderthals used resin and glue to attach stone tips to spears, which required complex chemical knowledge. They also made jewelry and possibly even bone tools that could have served as musical instruments. All of this suggests that Neanderthals were no less skilled and inventive than we are. The difference was elsewhere. Neanderthals focused on what was necessary for survival, while Homo sapiens focused on finding new solutions and constantly improving. The social structure of Neanderthals was probably less developed than ours. They lived in small groups that were isolated from each other. This made them vulnerable to danger and limited their opportunities to exchange knowledge and experience. Homo sapiens, on the other hand, lived in large communities that were interconnected. This allowed us to create more complex social structures, exchange knowledge and experience, and unite to solve complex problems. Our ability to cooperate was one of our main advantages. New research refutes the notion of Neanderthals as primitive loners. Analysis of teeth and bones found in different regions has shown that Neanderthals traveled long distances and may have exchanged family members between groups. This indicates that there was some form of social connection between distant communities. Moreover, archaeological findings indicate that they cared for the sick and wounded. For example, skeletons with traces of healed fractures suggest that other members of the group helped the injured to survive. However, the difference in the scale of social networks was significant. Homo sapiens communities were much larger and more complex. This difference could have been crucial. Larger groups allowed us to hunt more efficiently, defend ourselves against predators, and, most importantly, exchange ideas and innovations. This enabled us to accumulate and pass on knowledge faster than Neanderthals. Neanderthals were incredible creatures who seemed destined to become the pinnacle of evolution. They were stronger, more resilient, and better adapted to harsh conditions than we were. But for some reason, they disappeared, leaving us as the only representatives of the Homo genus on the planet. Why do you think Neanderthals lost the evolutionary race? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos.